Hello and welcome to More Tea Minister. My name is Ian. Today we're doing a three-way white tea review, which I know sounds a little complex, but these three teas are all part of a reserve series, or they make up the reserve series perhaps, all from 2022, all from the Miyazaki prefecture in Japan. I don't know who the producer is, but the vendor is Tea Guru of Canada. So we have these three teas, all table white teas, Shirocha de Miyazaki, in other words, Miyazaki white tea, and we have these three different cultivars to examine. We have Kanayamidori, we have cultivar, and I'm going to mangle pronunciation, Minekaori, and finally, one that I've come across quite often, at least on websites and whatnot, the cultivar is Zairai. So, I should point out that I know these bulldog clips are a little unsightly across the top, but I've already opened the packaging for the next part of the video, and it's standard packaging anyway. But the original packaging is perfectly good integrity. I'm not in any way suggesting that these bulldog clips need to be there. It's only because it's been opened. Felt I ought to say that. So, looking forward to part two, where we're going to take a look at the teas themselves, and then we're going to brew these three teas in I'm going to call it teapot style rather than calling it Western. These are Japanese teas. You could call it Kyushu style if you want, but the point is it's not going to be gongfu, just a three-way teapot style or Kyushu style. So let's move on to part two. See you in a moment. Hello again and welcome to part two of our video. I hadn't anticipated actually looking at the packaging for these three teas, as they are standard packaging, but I thought we might have a little fun. So here we are with the first of the three teas. I've put them all on the Lazy Susan to rotate them. It's all Shirocha de Miyazaki, in other words, it's white tea from Miyazaki. And the first cultivar we're looking at is Kanayamidori. And then we're going to move the Lazy Susan around, and hopefully I've got these lined up nice and straight. Oh, it looks as if I have. And then we have cultivar Minekaori. And finally, there we go, cultivar Zairai, and they're all Reserve 2022. And now we're going to take a look at the tea inside this packaging before we move on to our review. See you in a mo. Hello again. Now we're going to take a look at the tea inside the three packages. This is the cultivar that is Minekaori. It's white tea from Miyazaki, as a reminder, 2022 Reserve in each case. I took a note of the scent of the dry leaves just as I was opening the packages, and this one was herbal and sweet and reminiscent of a Darjeeling first flush, that sort of fresh, very herbal, slightly sweet quality. The leaves, there's some oxidation here. I don't know if you can see some of these smaller, more oxidized components. The leaves, there are some intact ones, and some of them just withered to the point where, which is meant to happen, no criticism, where you can't really tell if it's a whole leaf or a fragment just because of how it's folded in on itself. Some paler pieces like these, usually the larger ones, but definitely some signs of oxidation and some fragments, but I'm not sure how long there's been in the package in the first place. Let's move this around. Let's see how well I've lined these up. Oh, that's not too bad. This one is the Zairai cultivar, and the scent notes that I took for this were, it's slightly bitter, not a criticism, herbal once again, which I suppose is not really a surprise, and slightly fruity, but coupled with that bitterness, it reminded me of the smell of apple skin. As you can see, I would say this is significantly lighter than the last one we looked at, the Minekaori. There's more pale green material, although that might simply be an artifact of these leaves surviving, but definitively a lot of that. Some darker material underneath, There does seem to be more of this larger pale green material. Definitely some wither, very good, nice withering. Definitely some stem material, stalk material, and some oxidation, but by no means as much as the previous one. Let's turn this round. And this is the cultivar Kanayamidori. Let's just move that slightly. I would say that is kind of halfway between the other two in terms of greenness. If I move it, it's by which I mean there is some oxidized material, not as much as the first one, I would say, but even the brightest material I don't think is quite as bright green as the Zairai that we've just looked at. Some oxidation, some stem material, some larger leaf, whether it's fragmentary or whole. So some distinctions in degrees of oxidation in terms of how well the leaves have survived the travails of being packed and sent over here and in my storage. But I'm also noticing some degrees of oxidation, some degrees of intactness, maybe even the size of the leaves, but that might just be to do with how well they've withered. So let's move on to brewing our teas. Back in a mo. Hello and welcome back to this video for part 3, where we are going to be taking a look at our white teas. I followed the brewing parameters from excuse me, the vendor. And so in each case, we've got 5 grams of tea per 250 mils of water at 85 degrees centigrade with between 1 to 2 minutes brewing time. Now, that seems like quite a high proportion of tea. However, excuse me, just because Taiwanese tea can take a slightly different ratio doesn't mean to say that Japanese white tea and Japanese tea cultivars will behave in the same way. And also it's a slightly reduced steeping time. So it's not quite as on the fly as a gong fu, but even with this slightly prolonged way of brewing, teapot style, let's call it that, rather than Western, obviously, you can still tweak it slightly. So on my left, we have the Kanayamidori Reserve 2022. In the middle, the Minekaori 2022. I've probably said these, pronounced them differently each time. And the Zairai 2022 on my right. So let's take a look at the colour of each in turn. That's a very intense gold with some yellow thrown in, but to lighten it rather than make it darker, I would say. The Minekaori is a little lighter still, I would say. Gold, but slightly paler still. And this one, the Zairai, I would say it's yellow with some gold. So you've got the definitive kind of change of colour. Incidentally, I appreciate the vessel in the middle isn't a jug like these. However, it is thin-walled, so I was hoping that being transparent and thin-walled, it wouldn't distort the colour and misrepresent the teas. So let's try the Kanayamidori. Herbal, a bit of sweetness, but still a tang, not bitter, but there's still a tang there in the background. Okay. This one, the Minekaori. Oh, it's floral, it's fruity, it's perfumey, it's heady, sweet. It really is like peach. That's what it is. It's like a peach. That's really interesting. And the Zairai. That's rather intriguing. There's a bit of sweetness, but there's also something, and this is not a criticism, I'm just trying to find the right word, a kind of a dull note. What is that? Is it woody? There's something that adds, it's not a savoury note, it's not astringent, but yeah, a dull, maybe slightly bitter note. But still very well balanced. So the middle one in particular, that's a very distinctive kind of peach smell. So let's try the taste of the Kanayamidori cultivar. Bearing in mind that these have now had about 4 years of aging, although I've had them since last year, and I'm not saying they've been able to age since, but there will have been some change. Bit of sweetness on the cup. Very smooth, sweet. Flavour's not dropping away, so that's a good balance of tea to water ratio. Good steep in temperature and time as well. Slightly drying on the mouth already. I would say the smell is coming through on the cup. It's herbal. It's sweet. Slightly fruity. Slight tang to it. It's no knees and elbows. It's a very rounded kind of flavour. Maybe that's what 3 years of aging or so does to it. I'm going to try the one on this end next, Zairai, because another one that hasn't got this kind of very distinctive scent. So let's try what this one is like. This had that kind of dull note. I'm not sure, slightly earthy. Maybe that's what the right word is. Actually, that comes through on the cup. It's sweet and slightly earthy. Yeah, that's very different. There's something running through that, sweet and earthy, and then there's white tea freshness and herbal qualities on top. I wonder if that's what Zairai actually brings. I haven't had a Zairai cultivar tea in any form, but that's really interesting to find that sweet and earthy combo running right through, start to finish, as you're tasting it, and then the other aspects, the white tea aspects on top. That's what I'm getting at. Let's go back to this and see if there is something similar to be said for the Kanayamidori cultivar. I'm not picking up something that's staying constant. Okay. So this is the really intriguing one. Once again, it's perfume and it's fruit. Really sweet. And something like a bright peach. It's all there on the cup. Wow. I wonder whether I seem to recall trying a tea before and saying on this channel it was like a ripe peach. I must go back. I'm wondering if at least one of these I've looked at as an oolong. If it is, I'll maybe double check my notes. Yeah, just great big sweet and fruity peach. Wow, it's almost wine. I don't mean any bitterness, but there's so much. I'm sorry for being a bit giddy. That's extraordinary. That is amazing. It's a pity I've only got a little. That is so fruity, so intensely peach. If you could turn peach into a wine, but without the alcohol astringency, that would be it. Or peach juice. That's phenomenal. That is remarkable. I really am intrigued now to see whether that's a kind of standard for the cultivar. Yeah, it's almost alcohol. hoppy, fruity, it's peaches, there's a bit of a tang, but I think that's white tea kind of quality, but that's incredible. Okay. I am not familiar with these three cultivars. I can't remember if I've actually looked at any of them before. What can we say about them? Well, I don't know what this extra time of aging has done to them. I can't even tell you for certain who the producer is, only the vendor. The fact that this is from Miyazaki Prefecture, well, I could speculate there aren't that many white tea producers from Miyazaki, at least ones who are sort of prominent. What can we say about them? They're all very different. They really are very different. Same brewing parameters, but very different. And we saw they were different in terms of oxidation levels as well. The Kanayamidori it's very rounded and it's very smooth. There's no knees or elbows, but it's not throwing up a particular kind of flavor or flavor profile. The Zairai definitely was something sweet and earthy sort of working together, and that was a bedrock to the flavor profile with white tea elements, I think, adding to it. So I'm going to guess that's what the cultivar does, but any experts will probably start shouting at me if they were speaking. This one, this Minekaori, it's just peaches. It's peaches. It's fruit wine. It's hops. It's amazing. Okay, straight up, just amazing. And at least some of these are still available on the website, which is bad news for me and my bank balance. I'm going to drink the rest of that. So, okay, let's sum up. All very different, and if you know these cultivars and what to expect from them, I would be very interested to know if anybody ever watches these and wants to comment whether what I've said is a reflection of the cultivar or whether it's what white tea processing is doing to them. This one in the middle, the Minekaori, I'd be very intrigued to chase down not just this particular tea, but this cultivar to see what it's like. I don't want to review this in a standard sense. I'm doing this as a learning experience for myself. The 2022 reserves, so you're not going to get them from many places. I did a Google, I couldn't find them anywhere else. I am not marketing this vendor, I'm not saying that, but given accessibility is one of the usual parameters, but we'll leave that to one side. White tea is obviously ubiquitous. Japanese white tea is becoming more prominent, and not simply something that was a one-off from a number of years back, but something that's been done year on year, including quite a few from Miyazaki Prefecture and specific tea farms. Was it easy to brew? I followed those parameters and it came out an absolute blinder. It's wonderful stuff. I'm going to drink the rest of this before it gets too cold, then I'll finish off. Oh, wow, that's extraordinary. They're all lovely. This one for its smoothness, this one for a very definite flavor profile, and this one for just being fruit and peaches and wine and just loads of that, all that good stuff. My mouth is just full of peaches and something almost winey. So, moving on. Not going to give it any numbers out of 3, but I'd have no hesitation if I was going to. If any of this sounds intriguing, as I would always recommend, do try, if you can, to get it through the vendor. I'm not sure you'd have a choice, but purely I'm saying that as courtesy. I would, if you could only go for one of them, maybe I can say that this Minekaori Reserve 2022 is phenomenal. It's one of the nicest teas I've ever had. I'm just going to throw that out there. No questions asked about that. So, Thank you very much. If you managed to stick with me through to the end of this, I hope you've learned something. I certainly have. I've also enjoyed this, and that might be perhaps a bit too much to ask that you've enjoyed yourselves, but if so, that's even more pleasing. So it only remains for me to say, as always, happy steeping and God bless.